Hi everybody, today we're gonna learn how to play Estoril 1942, a game of spies. This game is designed by Gilles Doré, that you probably know from Panamax, and Antonio Sousa Lara, and is published by MESABoardgames. The game plays 2 to 4 players and lasts around 45 to 6 minutes. In this game, basically, players will try to create the most effective network of spies in order to gather the most victory points in the end of the game. Interesting enough, this game is based in historical events that happened during the Second World War. In fact, we will move our characters in several locations of the village of Estoril, that is a village nearby Lisbon, where around this period several personalities would hang around and would spy themselves. So you will see Americans spying Germans, Germans spying British, British spying French, all sort of different things. And this game tries to recreate that kind of environment while players are trying to recruit these same personalities, or let's call it characters. So first of all, let me show you how we set up the game, then I will show you how to play the game, and then I will be back to give you my final thoughts. So let's learn how to play Estoril 1942. To set up a game of Estoril 1942, a game of spies, the first thing we have to do is to assign to all the players one of the 4 colors. So in this case I'm setting up a game for 3 players, so I've assigned blue, green and red as the players. The first thing you have to do is to give to each of the players their 6 starting cards and some cubes on their color. The cubes depend on the number of players, so if you are playing a 2-player game, each player is going to receive 6 cubes of his color. If you are playing a 3-player game, each player will receive 4 cubes. If you are playing a 4-player game, each player will receive 4 cubes. Then what you're gonna check is that you get all the 6 cards, all of your 6 starting cards. You can see that because each character card has the starting symbol here. In this case, all the 6 starting cards of the green player have this green icon on the top right corner. So each player starts exactly with the same 6 starting character cards, and then what you do next is you go to the mission deck that comes with 12 missions. You can randomly choose 4, and you're gonna put the remaining 8 out of the game. They will not enter this game. So these 4 missions will be end of the game scoring bonuses. So it's good always to keep them in mind while players are playing the game, because they can be one of the ultimate goals. Then what players do, they take the remaining character cards, so all the other cards that are not the player's starting cards, in this case they are 27, they give them a good shuffle and they put them here aside in order to set up the game in the beginning of each phase. And the last thing you do before the game is that you determine who is the first player to do that. Basically, all the players roll 1 die. The player who has the higher value takes the first player card. That is also the round marker. Let's imagine, for example, that the green player has rolled higher, so he gets the first player card and he puts a cube on space 1, meaning that we are ready to start the setup of the first round. Then in the beginning of each phase, so you will do this 4 times because we're going to play during 4 rounds. In the beginning of each round, what you're going to do is you're going to take all the 8 location boards that come with the game. You're going to randomly shuffle them and randomly draw 6 of them. You're going to create a grid 2 by 3, and also the orientation of each one of the boards can be randomly assigned, so that you have a kind of variability in the relationships that can be created between each of the boards. Let me do this and I will show you the rest of the setup before the beginning of each. And in the beginning of each round we would get a grid just like this. randomly chosen between the 8 available location boards. These 2 are not part of this round, they're gonna be set aside for now. And what we're gonna do next is we're gonna put a character card in one of these spaces. These spaces are called reward spaces. So these are the spaces with this yellow and black line. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take characters from the character pile, and we're gonna place one character in each of these spaces. The only thing we have to make sure is that when in a space is written top secret, the card has to be face down. When there's nothing written, the card has to be face up. So in this case, for example, I would put a face down card here on the hotel. I'll put a face up card here on the church. I would put a face down card here on the museum. Another face up card here on the restaurant. Another face up card on the beach. And finally another face up card on the other hotel. So now we are basically set to go. So in each round, players will take turns taking one card from their hand, placing the card in one of the locations and putting a cube above that card to show that that card belongs to that player. And players will do this until players don't have more cubes to place. So in this case, in each round, players will place 4 of their 6 characters they have in hand. After that, we're gonna score each one of the locations. We're gonna see who has more strength or influence, let's call it like that. Who has more will get the reward card and will be able to add that card to his hand. And another round will start. In the end of the 4 rounds, we'll check players who accomplish the missions. We always check the VPs on players' hands, and we also check the victory points of the discarded cards. And the player who has more points will win the game. So like I said, on the player's turn, the only thing he can do is to take a card from his hand and place it on the board. So let's see how these cards work. The first thing you have to notice is that every character card in the game has on the top left corner a strength value. So the rulebook calls it strength. Thematically, we can say that is influence, because this is we're going to compare with other players when we are resolving locations to see who has more. Who has more will gain the reward of that specific location. So on the top we have the strength, then we have the nationality, then we have abilities. So all of these cards have different abilities. I will go through them later on. And some cards, in this case woman cards, character cards, they have the woman symbol that could enter into consideration in some of the missions. Not in this case any of the missions has that requirement, but there are some missions that have that requirement. And finally on the bottom we have the number of victory points that each one of these cards will get the player if the player has them in their hand when final scoring happens. As you can see, the reward cards, for example, they have a higher strength value and sometimes also higher victory point value. So that's why players will try to gather them and to add them to their hand so that in the future they can gather even more characters, reward characters. So like I said, on his turn the player chooses a card to play. So let's imagine that the green player would choose to play one of his cards. Let's say that he would play his card here, and what he has to do is he has to place the card or in an outer space. The outer space are all the spaces that are on the edge of this grid, or in an inner space, and the inner spaces are all the spaces that are not outer spaces. But there's a restriction, because if you play a card in an outer space, for example here, and we have to place it face down because it says top secret. If I play a card on an outer space, I can play it without any problem. The only thing I have to do is to make sure there's free space to put my card. There's no one in the board now, so I can put the card here. I put one of my cubes. However, if I wanted to put a card here, and the situation was like this, it was not possible to do it, because if you want to put a card on an inner space, you have to have at least one card adjacent to it. So if I had a card in my previous turn played here, and it come again to the turn of the green player, and he wanted to play a second card, now he would be able to put a card here, because he had an adjacent card here. So that's the rule. If you place a card in the outer spaces, there's no restrictions. If you place a card on an inner space, you have to have at least an adjacent card. And adjacency in this game are cards that share an edge with that same space. So for example, a card here, this card is not adjacent to this card. This card is adjacent to this card. This space is adjacent to this card. This space is adjacent to this card. So you have to take that in mind. So, like I said, you have to choose a card from your hand, and you have to place the card in one of the spaces, following the rule I just described. When you place a card in a space, you can activate the space's special power. And these spaces on the location boards, they have different powers. There are 3 different powers. This one here means that if I place a card here, I will be able to see any card that is face down on this location. If I would place the card here, though, I would be able to see one card, a face down card, in this location or in any of the adjacent locations. Once again, the concept of adjacency, location boards adjacent to this location are only this one and this one. Diagonals don't count as adjacent. So you ask me, so why don't you put the card here? Well, because afterwards, and you will see that when I explain the resolution of all the locations, after a player plays a card in a location, we start to resolve the abilities of the cards starting by the lowest number. So in this case, if I have an ability that for example, can knock out another player's card, and that's possible because I have a card that has an assassin icon, I will go over that in a minute, then I want to be first than any of the other players. And in this case here, if I put a card here, I also prevent that any of my opponents will be able to put a card here, because this is an inner space and they would have to have a card adjacent. And because, like I said, diagonals don't count, even if a player puts a card here, or later on a card here, or a card here, or a card here, he will not be able to put a card here. So I know that by playing this character that has this icon that, like I said, I will explain in a bit, I will be able to knock out any card that will be placed here. So that's why, despite this power is not so powerful as this one, because here I would be only able to see a card from this location, this allows me to go first. And so let's say this would be the turn of the green player. Then we would go to the blue player. The blue player, for example, would put a card here, putting it on the space number 1. As you can see, normally the lower spaces don't have any kind of special power. And the particularity of this space doesn't have any top secret icon, so the card would have to be face up. So let's say that the blue player would play his card here, and then we would go to the red player, and then we would go back again to... Okay, so let's suppose this is the end of the round. All players have played 4 of their 6 cards they had in hand, and now it's the moment to resolve the locations. To resolve the locations, the first thing we have to do is we have to start resolving by the location with the lowest number. You see that all locations have a number on them. So let's see how this location would resolve. When you resolve the locations, you only flip the character cards of that location. So in this case, we would flip these two character cards, and then we would start resolving the card's abilities from the lowest space. In this case, blue player would resolve. So you can see this card has no special ability. The only thing he grants is 2 strength. Then we would go for the red player. Notice that the red player has this symbol here. This ability means nationalism. This means that this player will gain 1 extra strength for each character in this location or in adjacent locations that shares the same nationality, even if it's another character of another player. In this case, there's another Portuguese national, so he would get 1 extra strength. If these locations would be already resolved and there would be face-up cards with Portuguese flags, then he would also get those extra strength points from these 2 adjacent locations. That's not the case, so he gets only 1 extra strength. It's not enough, so the blue player gains the reward card and places it next to his hand. Then we would go to resolve location number 2. This is not flipped, I'm sorry, this is only flipped when it's gained. So in this case, no one fought for this location, only the green player. He's the one with the most strength. He would get this card. He doesn't need to show the card to other players. I can show you. That is our friend, Russian spy. So then we would go to location number 3. You notice, please, that while you're resolving the locations, you only collect the reward cards. The character cards stay on their locations because there's a bunch of interactions that can be dragged from them. So if you would be resolving the location number 3, that's the beach, and the speciality of this location is that cards are always played face up. So when the blue player played this card and then the red player played this card, the blue player knew immediately that this card would activate. I will explain that in a minute. So the blue one played this one. Why? Because blue played this card. This card has the icon of seduction. Basically what this meant is that the blue player, if there was an empty space in this location, could drag another face-up card from adjacent locations to this location. He could also choose a face-down card. The only thing he couldn't choose is a character reward card. So, for example, if there would be an empty space, imagine that there was no card here on space 3, while resolving this now, he could drag one of the cards from adjacent boards. But in this case, there's no space, so he can't activate this ability. Then we would go to space number 2, and the red player would trigger its assassin icon. This basically means this player can choose one card from this location to be brought back to the player, to the owner's hand. So in this case, he would have the chance to take down this one or this one. It's basically he would choose to take down this one, so the blue player would get back his card, and then the blue player would trigger the ability. This ability is diplomacy. Basically what it means is that the player gets a white cube, and he can place this white cube on his card or in any card in an adjacent location. That card basically prevents the player from being assassinated or from being dragged by seduction. In this case, as he doesn't have cards in this board or in this board, doesn't make any difference. And also he knows that the assassin already used her ability, so he's safe. But imagine that if he would be if this card would be on the space number 1, by doing this he would prevent then the assassin to knock out his card. So players then compare strength. Red player has a total strength of 0, blue player has a total strength of 1, so the blue player gains the reward card. Imagine, for example, that there was no other cards. Despite having a strength of 0, this still counts as the only one who has control of this location, so the red player would take the reward card. That's not the case because the blue player had his card there. Then we would go for board number 4. We would flip board number 4, and in this board we would check then from the lowest space. We'd start with space number 2. So the green player again activates his assassin icon, so he basically kills the red player's card, so the card goes back to the red player's hand. And again, green player is the only one, 0 strength still counts, so he takes the reward card into his hand. Then we would go to location number 5. In this location only the green player has a card here, but it will be enough for me to show you this icon. Basically what this icon means is the conspiracy icon. So basically what the player does, he gets the top card of the character deck, he sees it, and he decides if he wants to swap this card with the reward card that is currently here, and the card that he doesn't chooses he puts back on the bottom of the character card. He thinks this card is much more interesting, so he puts the card here, and this card goes on the bottom of the pile. And now we compare the strength. He's the only player with a character card here, so he has 1 strength. He wins this reward card, and he adds this reward card to his hand. And then finally we would resolve the board, location board number 8, in this case that is the museum. And to finally resolve this, we'd start with the lowest space again. So we would see that the blue player has an assassin on space number 1, so he has to decide which one of these 2 characters he wants to assassinate. Doesn't make any big difference. They are the same. In any case, he won't have full control of the board. So let's say he thinks that the green player already took too many cards, so he assassinates the green player's character. And then, so this space doesn't activate. Then we go to space number 3, and here we could see the seduction ability. So basically, the red player, he would still win this location because he has more strength than the blue player. But just to show you how the seduction works, so basically he could drag a character that is adjacent. So in this case he would drag his blue character here to his board. Like I said, it wouldn't make a difference because he has more strength, but imagine that here there was a 1 of strength. If there would be a 1 of strength here and a 1 of strength here, this player would gain, because when there's a tie on strength, wins the player who has a card on the lowest space. So if that would be the case, then this play would be a really good play, because then he would have 3 strength. And sorry, I pulled the wrong one. I should have pulled the red one. But imagine that the red one, like I said, had 1 of strength, then he could bring a character to this location to add to his strength. So basically that's how the resolution in this board would work. And then of course he would check, he would have more strength here, he would gain the card and would add it to his hand. And so this would be the end of the resolution of all the location boards then. And then only now all the character cards marked with players' cubes will be back to their owner's hand. I will do that, and I will show you how we end the round. So then, after all players have retrieved all the character cards they had on the location boards, they will then have to discard cards until they only have 6 cards in hand. So in this case, for example, the green player, he gained during the round 3 new character cards. Of course, he will try to keep them because they are more powerful than his starting cards. And if he looks and he checks the 4 mission cards, he can see that having Portuguese flags is quite important at the end of the game, because you can target that mission there. Basically, the missions work. Each mission has a kind of has a symbol. In the end of the match, the player who has in his hands more cards with that symbol will gain that mission. In case of the die, players will divide points. If there is more than 2 players, then points will be rounded down. So in this case, he would like to keep the cards with the Portuguese flag. He also would like to keep the cards with the assassin icon, because that's also one of the missions. He will also try to get a lot of different nationalities, so he can also target that mission there. So let's say he then thinks the best is to discard these 3 cards. He also has a Portuguese flag here, but he thinks that this card will not be important later on. So he discards these 3 cards. The cards are face down, and he then has his hand of 6 cards. All the players do the same. When all the players are back to 6 cards in their hand, the round ends, and then the round marker goes to round 2, and the first player card goes to the player on the left of the actual first player. And then we'll take out the boards. We will mix the boards again with the 8 boards that come with the game. We'll randomly choose again 6, make another grid, and we'll see the grid with new character cards. The only thing I didn't refer is that not only each one of the spaces on the locations have a special ability, also each location has a special ability. And we can see that, for example, the specificity of the beach is that she doesn't have any special ability, but all the cards have to be placed face up. If we see here the hotel, the ability of the hotel is that all the cards here that have the British flag will have 1 extra point of strength. The church allows that a player is safe from assassination, so a player with the ability of assassination cannot use this ability on this location. We see the museum. The specificity of the museum is that instead of 3 spaces like all the boards have 3 spaces and 1 reward space, the museum has 4 spaces and 1 reward space. And also the museum is the only has the only space on the board that has this ability here. And this ability says if a player places a card here, he can see not only a card, he can choose to see not only a card from here, or he can choose to see a card from adjacent locations, or he can choose to see a card from any location on the board. So that's extremely powerful. So by placing a card here, he can choose to see basically whatever card he wishes to see on the grid. Then we have the restaurant. Basically what the restaurant does, this icon here means that when we are playing and placing characters, all the spaces on this location count as outer spaces. So I can put a card here without having any adjacent card. So that's what the restaurant does. Finally, the Atlantic Hotel gives 1 extra strength to characters that have the German flag. Also, there are the 2 other location boards that didn't made this first round. We have the Hell's Mouth, that basically in the end of the round, or after the location is resolved, the player who has less strength has to permanently discard 1 of the cards that he played in this location. So basically he loses 1 card. And finally, the other location is the casino. And basically what the casino does is for each character that a player has on the casino, he will roll 2 die. After he rolls the die, the difference between the dice gives extra strength. So basically, he rolled a 4 and a 3, the difference between them is a 1, so he will add 1 to this character here. If he would have 2 characters, he would roll for each of his characters. So basically, the casino is a bit more luckily based location. It's difficult to foresee the outcome of this location. So these are the 6 locations, the 8 locations that that make part of the game, from which you would choose 6 in the beginning of each round. Now that I cover the rules of how to play the game, let me show you how the final scoring happens. So when the 4th round is finished, we will proceed to a final scoring. To do the final scoring, basically the thing that the players have to do is to check the victory points they have in their hand, the victory points from discarded cards, and the victory points from the mission cards. All discarded cards will give players 1 victory point. So in this example, for example, the green player, he has 8 cards that were discarded, so he would get 8 points from these cards. Then he will get all the victory points from the cards he has in hand. So in this case, he will have 4, 8, 10, 15. So we'll have a total of 15 plus the 8 from the discarded cards. And then he will check, players will check for the missions to see if they had accomplished the missions. So, for example, this mission here, player with more flags symbol would get that mission. You can see that the green player has 2 flags. Let's say that he would be the one who had majority on this one. He would claim this objective. Then it would be the Portuguese nationals. He has 2, but let's say that the blue player had more, and then blue player would get this one. Then to see the players who have more different nationalities in their hand, let's say that the red player and the green player were tied. So for these nationalities here that counts, the green player has 4. Portuguese nationality is not required for this card, so you'll have 4 different nationalities. Let's say the red player would have also 4 different nationalities. They would have to share the points from this mission, so each one of them would gain 4 points. And let's say that the green player that has 2 assassin symbols would lose this to the red player because he would have, for example, 3 assassin symbols. So in the end of the round, the green player would get 8 points from the discarded cards, 15 points from the character cards. He would get 8 points from this card, and he would get 4 points from that card that he shared with the red player. The player who has the most victory points wins the game. Okay guys, time for final thoughts. First of all, this game is a very interesting game. It's a very easy to learn game. Actually, you can kind of use it as a gateway game to bring people that usually are not used to play board games. Because basically the game is as simple as this. You just choose one of the characters, you place that character and put a cube of yours just to symbolize that that's your character. What makes the game complex is the relations that are created between characters in a location or even in adjacent locations, because as you saw, a lot of the characters' abilities will influence adjacent locations and adjacent characters. So I think this game can please enough to non-gamers, but also to gamers, because you have a kind of a certain learning curve, and in your turn you have always to figure out what's the best move, and a lot of times you have to think in advance, because while the boards are resolved in numerical order, sometimes you are placing a character in a location that you already know that's probably gonna lose on that location, but you are setting you up for the next board that is adjacent and is gonna be resolved next, and then maybe you can use a power to drag that character of yours there so that you gain more strength or influence there, and in the end gain that reward card. So there's also a bit of bluffing, kind of outguessing your opponents, and I think that's really interesting in this game. So the game is, like I said, kind of a big puzzle that you'll try to sort it out every round. And then that leads me to my final consideration about the game, that has to do with the modular board. So, as you've seen in a lot of games like Istanbul, for example, where you have this variable board that is made by several small boards. In these games, normally you set up the board and you go with that board through the game. In Estoril 1942, this board will change each round. So you'll have 4 different setups during the 4 different rounds, which kind of creates variability and replayability that I think it's really interesting in this game. So it's a kind of interesting twist on the concept of a modular board. So like I said, in the end, it's a really easy to grasp game. There's not a lot of different rules, there's not a lot of exceptions, it's easy to learn, it's easy to bring other people that probably never played games in their life to the hobby. So in the end, this is a really nice and interesting game with the complexity that will also please to regular gamers. So I will give this game a big thumbs up, and I hope that by the end of this video you would be interested enough to check for yourself and to take your own conclusions. So that's how we play Estoril 1942. I'd like to thank you for watching the video and have a nice day. Bye.